It's a question asked every single day, probably thousands of times. What's the best lenses for me to take on my trip traveling? And unfortunately, there's no simple answer, but I've broken it down and I'm giving you my 3 favorite traveling lenses for your Sony E-mount camera system. Let's get started. Welcome back, guys, and today we're talking about travel lenses. And for me, I love to have a big versatile range when I'm traveling. I love wildlife, I love landscape and everything in between, so I like to have all my options covered, but at the same time I don't want to have a million lenses with me, and because size and weight is a factor, I've broken down 3 of my favorite ones that I'd recommend to you, and I'll also give you some alternatives as well. These are 3 that I just have chosen for some reasons that we'll get into, and let's dive right in. So number 1 on the list is none other than the Sony 16-35 f4, and I choose this lens mainly because of its size and its weight. It's a great size, it's a great weight. It's also image stabilized. So if I don't always have my tripod with me, or maybe it's not convenient to have that tripod set up at that time, I can still rely on this thing to give me really sharp images, even at lower shutter speeds. It's also a great versatile focal range. I can have 35mm and use it for portraits and get right in there when it comes to people and whatnot. And I can also use it all the way at 16 and get my huge landscape shots, get as much as I want in there at a time. As far as performance goes, the autofocus is reliable and fast. Like I mentioned, it is image stabilized, so you can use it at lower shutter speeds. And I don't mind the f4 because personally, I'm not really using a fast ultra-wide lens. I'm using it for things like landscape or real estate, but that's just my personal shooting style. Here are my personal pros and cons from my full in-depth review. So that's my first pick when it comes to ultra-wide lenses, and let's check out a few alternatives now. Luckily, we have several options when it comes to ultra-wide lenses, but I wouldn't recommend all of them for travel. One of the newer and more affordable lenses is the Tamron 17-28 f2.8. Coming in at $899 US, this is a great option for people on a budget or just getting started out. Keep in mind though, it's not image stabilized and does have quite a limited focal range. The 16-35 f4 I mentioned is $1,349, and with any Sony lens is going to come at a premium. Compared to the 16-35 f2.8 G Master at $2,200, and it doesn't look so bad. You've also got the less popular Sony 12-24 f4 at $1,750, which is a decent size but pricey. And there's always the popular but big and heavy Sigma 14-24 f2.8, a fantastic lens, but maybe too big for travel. A good ultra-wide prime that I recommend to you is the Rokinon or Samyang 14mm f2.8, budget-friendly and a decent size and weight, but very specific in its use. So some decent choices out there for you, but I stand by my pick with the Sony 16-35 f4 with a balance of price, size, weight, and performance. Number 2 on the list, it's a no-brainer. It's the Tamron 28-75 f2.8. Of course, again, its size and weight pretty much can't be beat for what it is. Fantastic, very sharp, very crisp pictures, and it's just a versatile focal range. When traveling, size and weight are going to be a huge factor, and for me it was really close between this and the 24-105 f4 from Sony that is image stabilized. Both fantastic lenses, but for me again, this one's going to win out just because of the size and weight. But it all depends on the type of trip you're going on and how much space you have. So I love this lens for its versatility. It's also a great video lens. It's an all-around great lens. So having said that, let's check it out a bit more, as well as look at some alternatives. This lens really has it all. Its autofocus is fast, accurate, and performs well in any situation. It's a fast f2.8, giving you beautiful blurred backgrounds, as well as decent performance in low light. I'd have to say this is one of my most used lenses. It's decently weather sealed, it does extend as you zoom, but it's a fantastic size and weight overall. Great performance, great value, I'd recommend this lens to anybody. And here's my personal pros and cons from my full in-depth review. So looking at some of our standard zoom options, our Tamron 28-75 is one of the best value for money lenses in my opinion that you can buy. At $879, it's a fantastic value. The native Sony 24-105 I mentioned is pricey, but it has a fantastic focal range and does include image stabilization as well. A great all-around shooter. The newer and very popular Sigma 24-70 f2.8 is a contender as well, although quite a bit bigger and heavier. You've got the older 24-70 f4 Sony, which for the price these days I can't really recommend, although it's a good size and weight. For ultimate native experience and performance, there's the Sony 24-70 f2.8 G Master. It does come at a price and it's quite big. And there's always the jack of all trades but master of none in the Sony 24-240 f3.5 to 6.3. I'd more recommend this lens to a beginner. It's going to cover a great focal range, but don't expect wonders in terms of performance or quality. So here's several options for you in terms of standard zoom, and there's lots of lenses out there. These are just ones that I'd recommend checking out. And of course, if you want more specific information on any of these lenses, check out my full in-depth review on each. And last but not least, our telephoto lens, of course. This is an absolute no-brainer, probably my favorite travel lens of all time. It's the 100-400 G Master. This thing is so small for what it is, and it's so versatile with its 3-foot minimum focus distance. I cannot get enough of this lens. Throw a 1.4 times teleconverter into your bag, and you've got a 150-600. It's an absolute no-brainer. This thing's going to be able to capture just a multitude of things on your trip, and it's easy to throw in your bag. What's not to love about it? So once again, let's have a closer look at it, as well as some of your alternatives. So this hands down is one of my favorite lenses ever. It's sharp through every focal range, at every aperture, and for me it replaces a lot of lenses I have to take with me places. Released with and for the A9, the autofocus is fantastic. You can bet that whatever you point this lens at, whatever you throw at it, it's gonna perform. I'm constantly amazed by this thing and just whipping my camera around to capture whatever might be heading my way. It acquires focus and captures whatever I'm looking for instantly. So yeah, it's got phenomenal autofocus, but let's talk about another huge factor in me choosing this lens, and that's the minimum focus distance. At just over 3 feet, this lens can produce some incredible macro-like shots, making it one of the most versatile extreme telephoto lenses out there. With your typical long-range lenses, you can expect between a 7 and 9 foot minimum focus distance on average, so to have a lens that performs this well inside a meter and still has some decent reach is fantastic. So yeah, it's great for birds and wildlife, but could you use it for portraits? Sure. What about events and landscape? Absolutely. It's small and portable enough that you can pretty much take it anywhere, and I find myself using it in a lot of cases. If I'm taking a telephoto lens traveling with me, this is straight up my #1 choice. Once again, my personal pros and cons. And let's look at some other options as well. The Sony 100-400, although fantastic, is very pricey at $2,500 US. I'd still recommend it to anybody for travel, absolutely. Next, we've got the newer Sony 200-600, a great huge telephoto lens, but unfortunately for me, unless you're going on a once-in-a-lifetime safari trip or bird watching or something, this thing's just too big. Decently priced at $2,000 though. Next is the Sony A7iii f4.5 to 5.6, a decent all-around shooter, but nothing spectacular. Decent size and weight though. Next up is the classic Sony A7iii f4, a great size and weight with a nice constant f4 that doesn't break the bank. Just don't expect wonders. If you want wonders, have a look at the awesome A7iii f2.8 G Master from Sony. A very expensive lens, and because of the size I wouldn't recommend this so much for traveling, but an overall fantastic performer. And keep an eye out for the newer Tamron 70-180mm f2.8, a fast and decent sized mid-range telephoto. The price is right, but unfortunately I can't comment on the performance as I haven't got my hands on it yet. No image stabilization, but it does look promising. Once again, this isn't everything available, just a few I'd recommend to keep your eyes open for, and maybe do a bit more research if it looks like a good fit for you. So at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to what's best for you. And your shooting style is going to be different. What kind of shooting are you going to be doing on your trip? Where are you going? Do some research and check out what's going to be available to you. If you're traveling only in cities, maybe it doesn't make sense to have a big telephoto lens. Alternatively, if you're going for the wildlife, maybe you don't need an ultra wide lens. So it's really gonna be up to you guys, and I hope this video was eye-opening, and I hope it helped and you enjoyed it. If you did, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Drop your questions in your comments down below, and like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.